mathematical tables anymore. These thinkers had to put all that stuff up in their heads because that's all they had to do. They couldn't carry stuff around. It's bulky documents and paper didn't exist for a long time and all this. And I think that the process of memorization that's had a religious beginning taught certain mental practices that enabled the management of huge chunks of data in their heads. No one ever talks about that. That's about all I can say on that one. The second one, I didn't recognize the name of the civilization, so I'm really ignorant. What was it? Mali. Spell it. Oh, Mali in Africa. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. A great center and in its own right, and then when Spain threw out its thinkers, a lot of the scholars headed there and took some documents with them they're just now being uncovered. So yes, it's wonderful. And the African story, I try and bring light to that because there's not that much understanding of it over here. The third one, Occupy Wall Street, well, I'm glad it's happening. As an American, I was concerned that the Tea Party, I don't think it's a spontaneous, I think there's anger there, but I think it's been manipulated by certain financial interests for their own ends. And so if Occupy Wall Street finds inspiration in Arab Spring, then that's a great contribution. Thank you very much. Yes. I guess my politics are showing, but whatever.
My name is Leslie Messi, and I've been very active in interfaith and interspiritual activities. I'm particularly interested that in the title of your talk, there's the word pluralism. Some of us want to get a group together, a grassroots movement for pluralism. It's a more active word than diversity.
Yes.
I mean, the acceptance of diversity, probably the lack of acceptance of diversity, as we hear from your talk, and how much there was in the Muslim tradition, is probably the largest problem in the world in not accepting diversity. So pluralism, I imagine you realize that in Canada, in Ottawa, we have the beginnings of a global center for pluralism, which was funded by His Highness Jaga Khan and the Canadian government together. And it just appointed its first Secretary General, an ex-Canadian ambassador to the United Nations. So I'm interested in how you see pluralism and whether we have a chance to get that concept more play and more interest.
Well, I mean, I'm a total supporter of it, but it is, as you say, more active than simply coexisting and allowing someone else to exist. It's more active. I'm concerned that, I give Isabella a hard time. I love Spain, and it's my second culture, but I feel that the Inquisition and the expulsion was the bellwether of modern Western ethnic cleansing, which we saw in the Balkans and so on. Dividing people up by religion and race and so on. I mean, it's horrible, but it's an awful trend that I think it's almost equal to the other side, which is pursuing inclusion and who's going to win out. Well, I hope I know who will win, but right at this moment, when we're talking about building a 2,000-mile fence in the United States and this sort of stuff to keep Mexicans out, I don't know. But it's a wonderful effort that you're doing. I imagine we have something like that in the U.S., maybe at Notre Dame or somewhere. I don't know.
There's actually a Center for Pluralism at Harvard University, religious pluralism at Harvard University.
That's not Prince Al-Walid's project, is it? No, it's separate. Okay. Pluralism is good,
You're very versed in historical facts, and that is great. But I wanted to, I should say, tickle your brain to see if I can bring you into the present and into the future. Now, given what we know these days about womankind and their quest for democracy and education and learning, what would you think that Islam or Muslims will be like in about, let's say, 100 years from now, seeing that a lot of countries are moving towards democracy and freedom of education for women?
Well, I think the trends are all encouraging. I mean, barring a total financial breakdown or a nuclear exchange with Iran or something horrible like that, I think that the trends are all good. You know, when you talk about the Muslim world, it's an ocean. It's just, there's so much there. What do you fix on as an indicator? I mean, you go from Malaysia to maybe Mauritania and everything in between. I mean, every gradation of government and economy and so on. But I think that there's obviously everything that's impacted on Asia and China and is also having impact in the Muslim world. It may, in some areas, it may be behind the trends. In some ways, it may be preserving things that should be preserved and trends that shouldn't be followed. But places like, you know, the Gulf Emirates and Malaysia and Jordan doing its best in a really unsettled area, and Morocco and Turkey, as well as the diaspora, people who live in the West, who came from other countries. I think all these factors are contributing to an evolutionary change in the Muslim world. And I think, well, look at King Abdullah in Saudi. He's going to give Saudi women the right to vote. Now, it's not going to happen tomorrow. I think was there a 4-year waiting period or something? But for Saudi Arabia, that's a big deal, you know? And of course, he's not going to live forever, and what follows Abdullah, I don't know. But I think all these things are pretty encouraging. Maybe you differ. I don't know what you think.
You know, in the Christian world, that happened, enlightenment, the moment of enlightenment. And, but in the Islamic world, a similar kind of movement didn't happen, or what is your view about that?
I think that it did happen, but it happened so early that it was not sustainable. I think it happened in Baghdad. I think the what we call the golden age, the age of Islamic rationalism, I think it happened, but I don't think it ever penetrated beyond the elite because there was not public education. It went contrary to people's intuitive learning, the large group of people. So it didn't hold, but that's what I think. Europe, you know, the political and economic basis for the Enlightenment had to sort of establish itself first, so that then the intellectual breakthrough could be sustained. Because look, it happened. The Islamic Enlightenment happened around, I think it happened in the 8th century, 9th century, 8th, 9th century.
I don't quite agree with you,
Okay.
because even the philosophers, they are called Islamic philosophers.
Yes.
So there was Islam in the philosophy,
Yes, of
rather
course.
than as a separate discipline like Kant and
You're
so
right.
on. So I don't think, you know, you're talking about Baghdad. Yeah, there was a good time,
Yeah.
but still, I don't know how you can compare to the Enlightenment of Europe later on.
Well, I mean, we differ on that. When you say Islamic philosopher, I think in that time, just as in say the founding of the United States, most of the founding fathers were either, I think they were from a Christian cultural tradition. They were deists, but they saw Christian thought in that time as being ecumenical and not rejecting rational inquiry and so on. Now, we have a different counter trend in the U.S. today, people questioning theory of evolution on a religious basis. But
I think you
I
picked
think
a-
that, you know, that the use of the word Islamic and it didn't negate the philosophy. It was more, more encompassing.
I think you picked a bad example as being
Did I?
U.S. Because I think U.S. is very religious. In fact, I agree with you. But my model would be more European, when they solved the problem quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
In his book, it's called The Crusade Through Arab Eyes,
Yes.
Amin Malouf, who's kind of a very renowned
It's a great
author.
book, really good.
At the very end, he had kind of an addendum in which he asked the question, did we really win? I mean, of course, in reality, obviously, the Crusaders were defeated, etc., and Jerusalem was, of course, liberated. And he said, appearance is deceptive. The Muslim world failed in two fundamental areas. One, at the time of the Crusade, of course, the center of technological, scientific thinking was still in the Islamic world. Unfortunately, this spirit, this inquisitive spirit, somehow something happened, probably because of foreign invasion, because of despotic regimes, etc. All kind of things happened, that somehow it was not given the kind of momentum. You know, Ibn Khaldun was discovered by Europeans. You know, the Muslim, although probably he was one of the greatest, if not the greatest mind that probably history ever known. The second is that Europeans, since that time, succeeded in solving what's called the transition, or transmission of power through democracy. So that nobody needs to fight about who's going to be the next king, because the Ottoman Empire, one of the reasons why it collapsed, every time a new sultan comes to power, the first thing he would do is to get rid of all the potential kind of contender. And of course, that really destroyed, I say, among other things. Right. Now, would you then say that, the fact that what is happening even in the Arab world today, like, somebody like, the president of Yemen, I mean, imagine the guy must be absolutely crazy. I mean, he could not recognize that really his people do not want him. The same thing with Gaddafi. So this, in a way, this despotic regime or despotism has been probably one of the greatest obstacles to the continuation of this, like scientific or enlightened, let's say, kind of society. And even pluralism, because despotism by definition is very exclusive, like you're either with me or against me. What do you think about this?
Well, I would agree to a point. I don't think that there's anything innate in Islam that makes it go into a despotic direction. I think that we have corporations that become despotic. Corporations where the boards, and this is maybe a bad analogy in the U.S., but where the boards pay no attention to what customers want or what share owners want, who just do what they do and pay giant bonuses, and they take their companies down the tubes. Like certain auto companies I won't name, but others, banks, some great big global banks. And so I think the trend towards despotism is a human tendency that has to be overcome. And it's a sign of decay and fossilization that happens in any organization or culture, and no lack of it in the Muslim world. I mean, yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your personal effort and
Yeah.
personal interest historically to bring this justice point to us. But since we are living in the 21st century and been influenced mainly by the 20th century, I see some list of countries in the Arab world, and I think that you had access to some high-profile individuals in these countries, including presidencies and some princesses. And so from your personal experience interacting with these high-profile people, did you sense any hope that they acknowledge